Cancer, have you ever stayed not because you wanted to, but because you were afraid that if you left, the home you built would fall apart? I understand, because your soul once whispered, "I'm the last one holding this together. I don't have the right to give up." But now it's time to ask, who will shelter you if you keep trying to shelter everyone except yourself? This video isn't here to convince you to let go. It's here to remind you, you're not leaving to escape, you're leaving to come back to life. And that journey begins in the place every weary caregiver must eventually face, the moment when a soul has nothing left to give. Listen closely, because what comes next is the beginning of your rebirth. My dear Cancer, if you feel like you're standing in a familiar house with no way back, if your heart has been quietly breaking night after night and you no longer know why, then maybe this isn't random. It's a message you've waited lifetimes to hear. Because your soul, your Cancer soul, was never meant to be ordinary. You came to build a home from the pieces others left behind. You stayed when no one else had the patience to. You listened when no one else wanted to hear. You nurtured until you forgot who you were, lost somewhere in the act of holding everyone else. I don't know what you're holding on to: a relationship, a house, a promise, a family. I only know this. It's time to pause, not to give up on everything, but to ask yourself, what am I still staying for? I used to be like you. I once clung to someone simply because I thought, if I leave, they'll fall apart. I stayed in a place that no longer felt like home, just because I told myself, if I let go, who will keep it together? I held together a family where I was the only one who felt lonely. But then one night, a very quiet, very cold, very honest night, I sat with empty hands and I finally understood. No one needed saving, except me. I needed to be rescued from the version of myself that had forgotten how to breathe. Cancer, you have loved with the soul of a nurturer. You have forgiven far more than any heart should have to bear. You stayed silent even when you were the one hurting the most. You didn't stay because you didn't know how to leave. You stayed because you believed that sacrifice was the only way to prove your love. But did anyone see that? Did anyone ever look into your eyes and ask, "Are you okay?" Did anyone ever place a hand over your heart and say, "You don't have to carry it all anymore"? Maybe not, because you've always been the one who absorbs the pain for others. The one who stands in the storm and smiles as if everything is fine. But you know something? True love doesn't ask you to disappear. Healing doesn't come from enduring more. It comes from choosing yourself, without guilt, without fear. If tonight you curl into yourself again in the dark, if you've become so used to crying quietly, unnoticed, I want you to understand this. You are not weak. You are simply a soul that has carried too many things that no longer belong to you. And that exhaustion is your final wake-up call, a sacred bell ringing from within to remind you, you deserve to rest. You deserve to be nurtured as gently as you've nurtured others. You deserve to walk away, not because you're selfish, but because it's time to come alive again. This upcoming farewell, whether it's with a person, a role, or a memory, is not a loss. It is a soul's rite of rebirth. It is the moment you shed the last layer of the shell that has smothered your breath. It is the moment you look in the mirror and no longer see a survivor, but someone who is finally, truly beginning to live. I don't know how long you've been enduring this, but I do know one thing. No one was born to live forever in a role that no longer reflects who they are. No Cancer soul came into this life to keep giving from an empty well. So if you hear this, if your heart trembles, if you feel like crying without knowing why, that is the sign. That is the signal that the time for departure can no longer be postponed. And do you know what's miraculous? When you truly walk away, It's not only you who is set free. Those who once clung to you are also released from a dependency they never even realized they had. You pause so the order of things can realign. You walk away so the universe can reset its flow. And if you still find it hard to let go, try writing this down right now. I accept that it's time to leave, so I can come home to myself. Write it as a ritual, as a tiny promise, just enough for the universe to hear. And if you're brave enough, tell me, what's the hardest thing for you to release? Maybe it's a person, a memory, or a former version of yourself, the one who spent years trying to be the perfect home for someone else. Write it down, because maybe another cancer soul out there needs to read the very words you're about to write. Leaving is the first step, but after you leave, you'll enter a space that feels terrifying, a quiet emptiness no one ever prepared you for. And that is exactly where the next chapter begins, the stillness before your rebirth. Once you've stepped beyond that familiar door, the first thing waiting for you is not freedom, it is silence. A hush that doesn't feel peaceful, an emptiness that doesn't feel serene, a space suspended between two worlds, where the old one no longer fits and the new one has no name yet. That's when you begin to wonder, did I do the right thing? Was I too impulsive? Do I even deserve to live a different life? Or was this just a foolish dream? You'll walk through nights with no messages, asking if you've eaten. You'll wake up to mornings where the empty side of the bed feels colder than you expected. And inside, it won't just be loneliness. You'll feel hollow, as if something was taken from you, but you don't have the words to name it. But dear Cancer, listen closely to this. The emptiness you're feeling is the fertile soil your soul needs to bloom again. That frightening silence is the place where your old memories are dissolving, so your new dreams can finally have the space to unfold. You are not lost, you are shedding a shell. And like every creature in metamorphosis, there will come a stage where even you don't recognize your own shape anymore. I know you want to go back. You long for an apology, a hug, a familiar kind of care, even if it comes from someone who never truly understood you. But be careful. This is the moment when your heart is most fragile. This is the moment you're most likely to return to what's already expired, just so you don't have to feel this void. Don't trade the freedom you just touched for temporary comfort. Don't fill the silence with artificial noise, because this silence, though it hurts, is the gate that leads you home. I too have sat in the middle of the night, clutching my phone just to check if anyone still needed me. But the only thing I truly needed at that moment was not a message from someone else. It was a promise to myself that I will stay with me, even when no one else does. Have you ever done that? Have you ever placed your hand over your heart in a cold and empty room and whispered, I choose myself today and every day after? If not, then do it tonight. No flowers, no witnesses, just you and your presence, fully offered to your own soul. You will begin to see strange signs, repeating numbers, old songs playing at just the right moment. Don't be afraid. You are not losing control. You are being guided, because your soul, after years of silence, has finally found a place to speak. And in this stillness, you'll begin to hear something clearer than ever before. You no longer need to prove your worth. You are allowed to simply be yourself, and that is enough. If right now your throat feels tight, if a tear rises for no reason you can name, know this: it is not weakness. It is new life awakening within you, like a seed pushing through the soil, slowly but with unwavering strength. You are beginning to live again. And this stillness, it is not a prison. It is the space you've been given to hear yourself for the very first time. Say it now. As a sacred vow, I allow the silence to lead me back home. And if you're brave enough, tell me, when was the last time you truly felt alone? Share it, not just with me, but for another soul who might be searching for empathy in this very moment. And when you're still enough to truly listen, you'll start to hear the things you've long avoided, the quiet ache, the unlived dreams, the calling you've been too afraid to answer. That is when your true awakening begins. Have you ever wondered why this sadness feels different from all the rest? It isn't loud. It moves like a shadow, slipping into your chest, sitting beside you quietly. It has not come to destroy you. It has come to awaken you. Dear Cancer, this sadness isn't because you're weak or broken. Quite the opposite. It is the universe whispering, it's time to let go of the old shell. When a crab sheds its shell, it does not fight the old layer. It simply slips out of what no longer fits. You, too. This sadness is the last layer of pain that once defined you. I once thought sadness was the enemy. I used to push it away, forcing myself to smile. But the more I resisted, the more it returned. And then one day, I tried something different. I sat still. I listened to my sorrow as if it were an old friend. And I realized it hadn't come to break me. It came to show me the path I was meant to walk. Are you hiding your sadness? Are you smiling for everyone while your heart quietly falls apart inside? If so, I want you to know you don't have to do that anymore. True strength comes when you dare to sit with your wound without fearing it will destroy you. Why are you sad? Is it because a dream you once cherished has withered? Or is it because you no longer recognize yourself in the life you're living? I think you already know the answer, and your sadness is here to say, that's enough. It's time to wake up. Cancer, you are no longer who you used to be. The places you once belonged to now feel like clothes too tight to wear. The people who once walked beside you, perhaps, no longer share your frequency. Don't be hurt by that truth. Don't blame yourself for evolving. You are changing because your soul has grown and it can no longer accept what doesn't belong to the light. If you've ever felt empty around those you once loved, if you've ever looked at them in silence and felt a distance you couldn't bridge, then please believe this. It is not your fault. It is only a sign that you're stepping into another space where you must begin choosing yourself, even if it means not being understood. I remember once I stood before a mirror and no longer recognized my own eyes. They used to shine, used to be full of dreams. But that day, they looked dull and tired. I asked, who am I? Who am I living for? And I wept. After that day, I understood. Sadness is a signal that I had been living too long without honoring my free, wild soul. Are you feeling that way now? If so, don't be afraid. Let your sadness stay a little longer and listen to what it is trying to whisper to you. I believe deep within, you are being prepared for something far greater, a life where you no longer have to chase love, but become the source of it. But before that unfolds, you must learn to release the invisible cords of memory still binding you. If your chest feels tight right now, try writing this down. I accept the change that is unfolding within me. Write it so your soul knows you're ready, and I want to hear you. What is it that makes your heart ache right now? What are you still holding on to that makes it hard to breathe? Leave it in the comments, not for me to read, but for you to be seen and finally set free. Do you know your sharing might become the key for another Cancer listening now? Someone who needs to know they're not alone? Dear Cancer, your sadness was never meant to drown you. It is the rain washing away the dust clinging to your soul. You are strong enough now as long as you dare to look it in the eye, and you'll see This sadness has come to give you wings. At some point, you'll realize you're no longer looking for a home, because home was never at the end of a road. It lives in the soft whisper from within, and in the dreams you once dropped along the rushing current of life. I used to dream of places I had never stepped foot in. A quiet kitchen filled with sunlight, a small garden where no one knew my name, but I felt deeply, unconditionally loved. Those dreams kept returning, until I understood it was a call from a place my soul once belonged to. Cancer. Have you ever felt that too? A place not on any map, but it makes your heart tremble just to envision it? That place doesn't have to be a city. It could be a friendship, a space, a state of being, a place where you don't have to try to be understood, because just by being there, you already are. We've grown so used to searching. But maybe the truth is, home was never out there. It's the place you stop pretending. It's where you no longer need to prove anything, where your soul breathes, not for anyone, but simply for you. I've lived in beautiful houses and still felt lost. And I've also sat alone in the arms of nature and felt a warmth reach into every cell of my being. That's when I knew home isn't where people are. It's where you no longer have to abandon yourself. Cancer, you've stayed too long in places that made you tense up, smile when your heart was breaking, and stay silent when all you needed was to be heard. But now, you've traveled far enough, and home is waiting for you in every slow breath, in every dream yet to be lived. You deserve a place like that, a place where you don't have to harden yourself. You deserve to wake up each morning and feel, today, I don't have to wear a mask. I don't have to be anyone else. Write it down right now as a ritual of return. I am coming home to myself. And if you've ever felt that there's a place you've never been, but it feels familiar, tell me about it. Not just to tell, but so that your soul may be affirmed. I see you. Because maybe, just maybe, when you speak of it, a Cancer, somewhere on the other side of the world, is waiting to read your words so they can believe they are not lost. They're remembering the same place you are. Cancer, when you come home, you are returning to yourself, to the pieces once forgotten. Your passions, your dreams, your light. They've all been waiting for you there. And that place is where your gifts, your creativity, and your true love begin to rise again. That is when we step into the next chapter, the resurrection of the energy that has been suppressed. How long has it been since you last cooked a meal just because you loved the scent of it? How long has it been since you tended to the garden that once brought you peace? How long has it been since you said goodbye to the very things that used to move you just because someone else said they didn't matter? Cancer, I know life may have turned you into the one who carries everything, and little by little, you traded away your inner light to become a reasonable adult. You stopped nurturing your own dreams, not because you stopped loving them, but because you believed you no longer had the right. But did you know the things you once loved never left you? They simply went quiet, softly waiting for you to return and call them by name once more. Can you hear that whisper? The voice of the cookbook you once cherished, the idea you once had for a small business, the creative spark you deleted because you were afraid someone might laugh. All of it is the breath of your soul, and if you do not breathe it back in, you will go on living with a soul that is hollow. I used to think my happiness must come after responsibility, but one day, I woke up and realized I had become a copy of myself, still breathing, but no longer glowing. Cancer, you don't need to succeed by someone else's definition. You only need to live in your frequency. That frequency may not be loud or flashy, but it is real. And when you touch that frequency, all doors will open. Remember when you were a child? Did you need a reason to care for a stray animal? Did you need a plan to build a blanket fort? Because within you was a fountain of endless creation, an ocean of emotion, ideas, and intuition, just waiting for you to open your heart so they could rise again. Listen, love, your dreams never asked you to be perfect. They only asked that you show up with your true heart. I believe if you stay silent long enough, you'll begin to see a flicker of light. It is the creative, nurturing energy that has long been suppressed inside you, knocking gently at your door. You can choose to ignore it, or you can open that door and begin again. You don't have to become a great artist overnight. You only need to give yourself permission to live authentically. Write this down right now. As a gentle awakening, I give the nurturing energy within me permission to come alive again, for myself. And if you've ever loved something but stopped because of someone else, tell me about it. Tell it like a ritual to restore your soul. Because when you write it down, you are giving your spirit permission to live again. None of it ever truly disappeared. They've only been waiting for you to take your first breath again. Dear Cancer, you are the soul of feeling, of memory, of moonlight. And when you live in alignment with that energy, you don't just live for yourself. You become a guiding light for those whose inner flame is fading. And when you come alive again, radiant and luminous, remember this: you were never forgotten. You only needed to be remembered by your own heart. And so we close this journey, not as a goodbye, but as a doorway opening for you to step through with a heart that finally belongs to itself. Cancer, thank you for staying until the very end. Wherever you are, however you feel, please remember this: departure is not to disappear. It is so that at last you may truly live as a soul freed from its shell. I hope you walk forward with a heart full of gratitude and hands that no longer cling to what was. May the road ahead lead you to the most radiant version of yourself you've ever met.